and welcome to the Linux Spotlight. This show is dedicated to showing off the best thing about Linux, our community. This community is made up of developers, distro maintainers, YouTubers, and everyday users. Each one plays a vital role in our community, and the goal is to have a discussion with each individual about their journey into Linux and beyond. So join me now as we turn the spotlight on. Hello, I'm your host, Rocco, and with me today is my friend, Eric Adams. How are you, Eric?
Great. How you doing, Rocco?
Pretty awesome, man. I get to sit down for maybe an hour or two and talk to you about Linux.
Are you going to try to outdo Colin's episode?
No, I'm not. But we'll see what happens. Okay. We'll let it run off the rails if we need to.
Oh, my goodness.
All right. So you have your own YouTube channel. You are a Biddle community member. But who personally is Eric Adams?
So I am lucky enough to be married to my best friend, and I've been with her for about 25 years now. And honestly, you know, I wish for everybody in the world that they find their partner, the one they're meant to be with, and I found her. And my entire life has been guided and driven in a direction because when I met her, I wasn't really doing much of anything. I was just working, and you know, I've always had a job and been making money and all that, but it wasn't like a career. I didn't have a future. And so meeting her and realizing, hey, this is someone I want to do better for. And it got me, actually, we'll circle back around to the computer conversation, but it got me forward, moved me into a career mindset of where do I go from here? What do I do? We have a 7-year-old daughter that just started second grade a few days ago. And so she's pretty excited about that.
Nice.
And I grew up in Western Pennsylvania outside of Pittsburgh in Washington County on a farm. And I was a farm boy, and moved to Pittsburgh, met my wife there, and then followed her out to New Jersey. And then we lived there for a while. Now we live down in Florida in Sarasota. So it's a tropical paradise and lovely place to be.
Nice.
So besides that, I had a long career in IT, about 20-year career in IT, and have also done a side career of designing websites, and have done that for about 13 years. So mostly revolved around technology. That's sort of what fires me, gets me motivated. Lots of other things I like, nature, outdoors, fishing, things like that. Excuse me. Unfortunately, about 4.5 years ago, I got a surprise in that I got leukemia, and really just kind of out of nowhere. I was super busy with my job. I traveled constantly, and just started feeling sick and run down. I thought, it's flu season. And it just turned out that wasn't the case. And so since then, I've had to step back from full-time career, and I'm just trying to work on getting myself healthy, and was a little bored, was a little feeling by myself. You know, I don't get out as much. And so I was very lucky to sort of fall into the community, and in particular Biddle, but we'll get into that a little bit more too.
Yep. So that is like an awesome story, especially the whole family thing, because most people just gloss over that. And when you're able to spend time with your family and put them first, it makes life awesome.
It really does. And like I said, I mean, you can't, there's so many people, the divorce rate, and just, you know, it's just not a fairy tale for a lot of people. But I have to say that if I consider myself blessed and lucky for anything in my life, it is having met my wife, having my daughter, having the family I have. It's like winning the lottery, I guess. But yeah, you're right. Because like I said, it has been the underpinning of everything that I do and what I've become and who I am and what I value and everything,
Yep. So do you got any other hobbies outside of Linux?
I mentioned outdoors, and I used to be into fishing quite a bit. And fortunately, with getting sick, I'm not really able to get out and do those things anymore. With also, before I got sick, I was training to be a pilot. I hit like 38, and I was like, in my midlife crisis, let's see, instead of buying a Corvette, I think I'll, do something a little more interesting.
Do something crazy and fly a plane in the air. I mean,
well, it's funny. I look back on it now, and I soloed, and I did my solo cross country, and I was by myself in an airplane, and I think about that now, and I'm like, was that really such?
No, it wasn't a good idea, dude.
It really wasn't. But it was interesting because it's so technical, right? I mean, it's that mindset, right? And I got into it because it was aeronautics and aviation mechanics and like understanding all of the science behind it, and that was just like the weather and mapping things and plotting courses, like all of it was just so nerdy and lovely. And the side benefit was I got to tactily drive a machine through the air, which is just insane. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I got right to the very end just before I got sick, and would have done my practical exam with an aviation examiner and would have been a licensed pilot. But yeah, and I I'm happy that I did it. I feel like it's one of those bucket list things. I check it off, and I'm I look back on it fondly, and I miss it a little, but it's not like the type of thing that defined me, like I can't.
Right.
But yeah, it was really cool.
That is awesome, dude. All right, so everybody in the Biddle community will attest to the utter magic that you performed on the Biddle website, and I personally appreciate that very much. But for those that don't know, tell us about your web design career.
Again, with technology, so I my initial career, or my original interest or training, was in system administration, mainly like DOS and early Windows. I really just kind of gravitated towards new technologies as they came up. So when I was just starting, and the web had been around for a few years, but it really wasn't. It was very rudimentary, but became more of a thing, right? And people were paying more attention to it. My job at the time, I actually had to set up some web stuff and a forum, and just sort of learned as I went. And as I was learning, it mixes the technologies that I am interested in. So it's server based. I had to understand how a web server works, and permissions and access and mapping domains and DNS and like all of that sort of stuff that's around websites. That's the back end of it is actually the most interesting part to me. But then the front end also of HTML and CSS and JavaScript, and how do these things all work together and create this layout on a page. And that was 15 years ago or longer, and to this day it's so interesting to me. So it's one of those things that's just held my interest. After that, I thought, well, I want to learn more, so I'll just start a little side business and see if people are interested. Put an ad on Craigslist. At the time, that was still a big thing, and it wasn't as, I guess, polluted as it is now. Craigslist ads are maybe a little sketchy now, but anyway, and I got some customers and helped them out and was able to do some things for them, and learned every new project was a new learning experience.
Yep.
And even now, doing your site, I learned some new ways of doing things that I'm going to apply to other sites that I manage. So every time I get a chance to work on something, it's an opportunity for me to learn. And that's really why I love technology. Like, I don't read books. I don't watch, most of the videos I watch are about technology and Linux. It's, if I read a book, it's a technical manual, it's a design book, it's something related to technology, because it's just what I'm fascinated by. And I seem to have an endless supply of energy for diving into it.
Well, you have done a ton of work on the Biddle site, and I love the fact that you continue to learn every day, because we all should. None of us are there yet. I think it's something important to approach it like that. That what can I learn from this?
Yeah.
So, all right. So you're around. You have contacts in businesses. You have contacts in your personal life. How do you find people respond, or are they receptive to Linux in your local contact area?
Most people have never even heard of Linux. And I don't blame them. It's not something I expect most normal people to have come in contact with, right? It's just not there, right? They may know a technical guy that said something about it sometime, but for the most part, I think there's just a very low awareness, for better or for worse. And but for the people that do know about it, so there is a lug that's in Tampa that's about an hour away. I haven't been able to get there because they have their meetings right around rush hour, which is a kind of a terrible thing. So a 1 hour trip would actually be about a 2.5 hour trip. And it's only an hour long. And so it's like 4 hours of driving for night.
Right.
And it's probably a bad excuse. I still want to go do it, but I just haven't yet. But something so Ryan, DOS Geek, he's sort of inspired me with his Linux and Coffee, and the fact that, yep, seeing some of those pictures, and it just looks like a lot of fun. It looks like something I'd really enjoy doing. And if that means trying to organize something, then I think it's something I'm going to try in my local area, just if nothing else to gauge the interest and see if people are responsive. I haven't quite figured out how I get that message out, but it is something that I would love to have in-person, face-to-face contact. I mean, I love all you guys. I enjoy Telegram and Discord and everything else immensely, but there's nothing like just sitting across the table from someone and being able to just, be in person. And I just feel like you make a different kind of friendship that way. And so we'll see. Maybe that's something that can happen here.
That is true, though. I mean, you do make a different type of friendship when you're face to face with people. And I found that out, and I think that you should definitely go ahead with that plan and try to get that organized.
Yeah.
All right. So before we get too deep into Linux, let's go back. You have a long career obviously you were in IT. You have a long career in computers. Where did you start with a computer? What was the first computer you used?
I'm not 100% sure. It's a toss up between an Apple IIe at my elementary school, or my grandfather had bought a Radio Shack TRS-80 color around that same time. It was about 4th or 5th grade. And on the Apple, I remember playing Oregon Trail and enjoying that quite a lot. And so that was the genesis of not only using a computer, but also games and interactivity. And
yep.
The TRS-80 was a completely different story because it was basic programming. And, I remember getting the books and writing the code and, coming up with these simple little programs, but the satisfaction of understanding that I could control it myself and that I could be creative, and I would follow it to a certain extent, but then iterate and change things and try things and break things and all of that fun stuff. And it did plant a seed in me, but for whatever reason, my high school didn't have a computer lab, and I just lost touch with it. I didn't have a computer for many years, basically all through high school, and until I met my wife after college. She had an Apple, one of those original the Macs that were color, the color shell. I don't remember what they were called, but the G4s or something like that. And so that kind of got me back into, and it was the old OS 9 stuff. And it made me remember that I liked computers. So that sort of kicked off the trajectory of my career later on.
So then from that point, when do you get your first computer that you use?
So I moved with my wife to New Jersey, and she was going to school, and I was a waiter. And it was like, I can't do this for the rest of my life. I enjoyed it. You know, I was 23, maybe 22, uh, and always had cash in my pocket, you know, that kind of thing. But I just could see that it wasn't going to be something that I'd want to do long term. You know, I worked holidays and weekends and just terrible hours, and I wanted something with a little more security and prestige, I guess. So I had talked with my grandparents, who were very sort of insistent about, you know, what are you going to do with your life? And I said, well, I'll tell you what, I believe that the computer industry is a good place. This was about 99, right, you know, right around 98, 99. And I said, I think this could be something for me. I think, you know, so they said, I'll tell you, let's get you a computer so you can learn about it and see what you think about it. And I remember getting a Dell Tower of some sort. I don't even remember the model or anything like that. So it was a Windows 98 PC. And so between Windows 98 and that was still 95 and 98 were really just sort of riding on top of DOS. So there was a lot of DOS stuff I was doing. That was right around, you know, dial-up networking for internet. So I learned a whole bunch of stuff, and I realized that, hey, I do really enjoy this. And so then I found a trade school that had a 1-year associate's program in basically, they call it computer technical support, but it was essentially just systems, learning system management. And after that course, I found a job with a company and ended up being with that company for like 18 years. Because I remember graduating and everyone's like, well, you're going to get your first job and then you're going to work somewhere there for a year and then you're going to go somewhere else and you're going to jump around and around and around. And I guess I just got lucky and found the right place to be. Gave me an opportunity. I got in and went from being the new hire to taking my boss's job in 6 months.
Nice.
And I mean, I was a young guy, and I think a lot of people were like, really, this is our sysadmin? Like, but I proved myself. I was dedicated. You know, I worked insane hours. You know, I was responsible for things that I probably shouldn't have been because it was mission critical. And, but, you know, I just threw myself into it. I just dove in and gave it everything I had, learned constantly. And I think that's what set this sort of precedent for me was I've learned to be self-reliant. I've learned to troubleshoot and how to assess a problem and be able to figure it out.
Yep.
You know, that self-reliance of being able to fix your own problems. And, you know, I think that's really what carried me through. And to this day is what keeps me interested and engaged with technology.
Well, you said one thing that I don't understand. You said in the same statement that you enjoyed all of it, and you mentioned dial-up at the same time.
Hey, man. So my recollection of computers back in the day, so the Tandy, to start with, I had a tape drive, like literally a cassette tape. That was how I stored my programs. And then I got a floppy drive, you know, which was like, whoa, you know, all of the storage space. And then, you know, so computing was an insulated thing. It was an individual thing. I wasn't on a network. The idea that I could connect to something else. I mean, I'd seen, you know, movie and TVs. I understood that was a possibility, but it wasn't something that I had done. So when I got my own computer years later and had that ability to connect to the world, you know, that was, you know, mind blowing.
Yeah, it was great. I'm not trying to downplay it. It's just funny.
You can laugh, but I know you miss that sound. I do.
Yeah, no, I don't miss that sound.
No? Okay. You know what? I had a server room at work that had about 40 or 50 modems going off and on continuously as it was. Oh my
gosh.
And so it was just a din. Like it's in my brain. It's like people love ASMR or they love, you know, the trance music, whatever it is. Like to me, it's that sound of the dial-up and the hum.
Now, look, I like nostalgia things. I like to think back, but I can't say that I'd want to go back to that dial-up time. You know what I mean? Like, no, no way.
No, absolutely not.
So you've got your computer, you got your job. Where do you hear Linux first at?
So yeah, so I was working. Most of my systems were DOS based. We had a Novell NetWare file server, which at that point wasn't really. They got into Linux later on. Um, we had a need, for some different infrastructure that really just wasn't something you could do on DOS. And at the time, NT had was out, but it was very, very young and very immature. And like file systems and services and stuff, it was there, but it wasn't very reliable. And from my experience at that point, so it was like there's got to be something out there, right? And so I just started looking around, and I came across, I think at the time it was probably Debian was the first thing I came across. And then I learned about, Red Hat and SUSE and just everything that was out there. And I started downloading and trying things. And it's funny because even then, Debian and apt and that approach to structuring a system was always the most appealing to me. And even to this day, I still love Debian based systems, apt, and there's just something about that that appeals to me and always has. And yeah, so I set up a file server. It just worked really well. I mean, it had its problem. There was a lot to configure, there was a lot to set up. There wasn't, today, anytime you have a problem, you just go to Google or whatever and search, and 9 times out of 10 you find immediately the thing that's wrong, and you may have to work it a little bit to figure it out, but the answer's there. The hive mind, the collective brain of Google is out there, and that just didn't exist at the time. So there were places to find information. It just wasn't that easy. And so it was a lot of trial and error, but it was stable, right? Once I got it working the way I wanted it to work, it just worked. Whereas at the time, NT would just blow up for no good reason. Kernel panics, crashes, lock up, just plus the idea that it had a GUI on top of it versus a command line, which I was so used to and comfortable with DOS. I like the explicit nature of putting in a command and knowing it's doing exactly what I want it to do. So I did that. I mainly around file services, because at that point there wasn't cloud. Everything that it was a file, you had to, especially in an enterprise sense, you had to have some sort of backup of it somewhere on the local network, because there wasn't an extranet, there wasn't somewhere else that data was going.
Right.
User's PC blew up, you had to be responsible for it in-house. I mean, today with cloud services and the ability to dump it out to a bucket somewhere, or Glacier on AWS, there's so many options for keeping data safe. And hard drives are huge and fast now. Back then they were slow and small, and people ran out of space all the time. It was like a weekly occurrence for some people that I was supporting. And so I had to have ways to get their files out and keep them safe and archive them. I mean, we had zip disks, if you remember those.
Yes.
But besides that, for the network, I mean, that was really what showed me how powerful Linux, and how it was the stability and the customization, and just and the fact that it was there and it was available.
Yep. It's funny because technology, it moves on. You go from the floppies to then the zip drives, and it's like at the time it was so great. Like it was so awesome.
Zip drives were magic at the time.
And then you went to CDs, and it was like, oh my gosh, we'll never run out of space now. And it was awesome.
Yep.
So you had no fear of jumping in trying Linux at all? No reservations or anything?
No, because I was in a position where I was already managing mission critical systems and could evaluate a platform and understand whether it met my needs and whether it was robust enough, and could I build in the redundancies that I needed. Just all the things that I had already learned the hard way. I was able to critically look at Linux and say, yeah, this is actually something that has merit and is something that's useful to me. And I can see, folding that into my operations and my own personal life as well.
Right. So you said Debian was the first one you tried, right?
Yeah.
So can you give us like the good things and the bad things about when you first tried it?
Well, so I tried server first, and really, the bad part was just having to learn so much of it yourself because there really weren't. It's not that the resources weren't there; they were just hard to find, and they were often very terse and not particularly verbose on detail and like examples and things like that. So between the man pages and some other things, I mean, I figured it out, but it took a lot of time, and so I'd say that was probably something that I consider a negative. The positive is just that it was there and it worked great. And like I said, it was a set and forget in most cases. You would do the things you need to do to set it up, and then you could literally just let it run. And as long as the hardware didn't fail, it was pretty much bulletproof.
So now, did you stay with Linux, Debian? Did you stay with that, or did you go back to Windows, or did you?
So around the same time, I was like, okay, well, so it's got this server side to it, but there's also the desktop side. So let's see what that's about. And initially it was pretty rough. Anything graphical early on was very difficult. Audio, graphics, any of that kind of stuff. IRQ conflicts, it's like goofy, all of that stuff. That we don't even remember or think about today.
Yeah, you don't think about that stuff.
No, I mean, you took a random 486, 386 PC and threw, Linux on it. And really, I mean, you had to do everything. So you did, people complain about Arch nowadays, but I mean, you literally had to, you layered everything. So you installed the system, and then you installed X on top of that. And then you installed, and you had to configure it. There's a script that would try to auto configure it for you, but that almost never worked. And then you had to go in and set all of your parameters. I mean, it was so time consuming, and then it was fragile. So you'd get it working, and then something would happen and it would break, and it was a constant time suck, really. And I was very pragmatic about it, where I said, okay, what is this giving me over what I have now? And particularly in a sense where we were already doing a lot with Microsoft, early versions of Office, and like sort of everything was in the enterprise was heading in that direction. So it felt like swimming upstream to go with Linux at that point. And the experience just wasn't all that great. So on the desktop, yeah, I just said I'd check in every now and then, and it was just sort of like, I just don't see it. For as good as it is as a base system for servers, it just wasn't there on the desktop, in my opinion. And I know there are people who've been using it all along, and maybe they had more patience, or they didn't have the same constraints I did with needing to support Microsoft.
Right.
I'm not sure. But what did happen is over time, I would check back in, and what I started to see were pretty rapid advancements, like projects like Mandrake, Mepis, SUSE. These distros were improving, and I mean, on like a 6-month basis, they were making these pretty quantum leaps,
Right.
And so I'm pretty sure, though, that what hooked me initially, or finally got me to use it on a regular basis, was Ubuntu. So once Ubuntu really put their layer of refinement and usability and ease of use with hardware, including, a lot of the driver support and peripherals and all that stuff, I remember when I first installed it, it just worked. And that was the first time I had ever installed any Linux distribution, and it just worked. And I was so impressed by the fact that they had put the time and the energy and the effort into the user, right, into the end user, and making it so that you could, even if you weren't technical, you could use it.
Yep.
Now, if you had problems, you'd still probably have, an issue fixing it. But that initial, and to this day, I still value that initial impression so much because of that original, experience I had. And I mean, I don't care if someone wants to call me an Ubuntu fanboy, because I know in my own personal experience, having tried all of those distros and trying to really use it and just not being able to, and then Ubuntu really revolutionized and changed that whole landscape for me.
So is it at that point that you started using it full time, or?
I did, and I don't. It's funny. So for probably 3 or 4 years in the I want to say somewhere around like probably 2005 to 2008 or 9, particularly at home. I used Linux exclusively. I mean, I had a Windows system for work because I didn't have a choice. But in terms of my day to day, like what I wanted to do with a computer, I would I was enjoying. I was using KDE 3 at that point and was really into. It just worked for me and made sense to me, and the customization, the fact that I could make it my own, and it felt like my own, was really what intrigued me. And I was using it on hardware too at the time. See, hardware today is so good. It There's almost no such thing as a terrible computer anymore, unless it's just old. There were computers at the time that were brand new that barely ran Windows. They just didn't have the specs for it, and it was either the graphics or the memory or whatever it was. Like, it just was not a good experience. It took forever to boot because the hard drives were slow. Programs took many, many, many seconds to open. It was just a poor experience. And then I remember going and using, KDE and thinking, it's fast. It's open fast. It's snappy. Even the disk operations seem to be faster for some reason. And it all just worked better. Although I understood that for normal people, it probably still wasn't something they were going to go and try.
Right. Yeah, it definitely wasn't for your everyday user yet.
So I after that, around 2008, I want to say, I'm not sure what happened. I think I got really busy with work. Also, one of the challenges I had was this was pre-cloud, pre-web everything, where if you wanted software, it was installed on your computer.
Right.
And there were so many things that Linux just didn't have, that just didn't work well or work at all. And I mean, Wine was there, and there were crossover Office. There were some things that were starting to develop that were promising, but it became a lot of effort. And what I was trying to do was I was unhappy that I had to use Windows for work, and it was its own set of applications and programs and data, and it was its own system. And then I had a Linux computer that I was comfortable with and really enjoyed using, but I couldn't do any work on it. I started doing things like I would just use like VNC to that Windows desktop so I could pretend I was still on Linux, and I think after a while I just kind of got fatigued, and I was really busy with work. I was traveling, 4 out of 5 days a week and that kind of stuff. And I just couldn't have both systems with me. And I just said, you know what, I'm just going to not deal with it for now. So up until about 2 or 3 years ago, really, I would check in every now and then. I would fire up a virtual machine and check out the latest Ubuntu and stuff like that. But I was still in that mode where my time was so valuable. I didn't have enough time to get my work done, let alone getting things done that I wanted to do. So it just wasn't a part of my life. But then once I got sick and had this extra time on my hands, I was like, I owe it to myself to go back and look at it. And I'm really glad I did, because the difference between Linux today and what it was 10, 15 years ago is it's quantum leaps ahead of where it was, not only in just supporting random hardware, but also just the refinement. It's just so good now.
It's funny because we talk about it every week. We talk about Linux, and I think we as a community kind of like gloss over how much advancement that we've made in Linux. And it is amazing compared to where we were to where we are now, where, I mean, could you imagine back then having a system that you could install? Anybody could install. You could give it to anybody and they would be able to use it and be familiar with it. We're in an amazing time right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think about cars being similar in the sense that when I was young, cheap cars were cheap, and they were ugly cheap, and they were dangerous cheap, and they were all kinds of cheap. They were slow. They were every bad thing about a car. And honestly, so all that traveling I did, I would get the most budget rental car that would still go 90 miles an hour, still had all the safety systems and airbags and infotainment. And there isn't, to me, I mean, electric windows, air conditioning. Like, I owned cars without air conditioning. That might blow people's minds today. I had cars with crank down windows. I had cars with, seat belts with no shoulder harness. I had terrible cars when I was younger. And, I look at even the cheapest car today, and there is no such thing as a bad car. You may not like your car. It may not be exciting or interesting, but it's safe. It's usually pretty fuel efficient.
Yep.
And I think of, Linux and computers being very similar. I mean, I swear, my old PCs, a power supply would go every few months or random things would break. And it's like, that doesn't happen anymore. Very rarely, for me, at least. I mean, I know you've had some.
I may beg to differ with that a little bit. All right. Do you still use Windows or Mac in any way?
So I have a main desktop PC in my office that I almost never look at, and it's running Windows 10. It's got some stuff on there, some media recorders and some other stuff that just kind of, they're Windows only. And it wouldn't be the end of the world if I didn't have access to them, but I do use them very rarely. And it's also, because I don't have to deal with it all the time, it's fine that it's just Windows, and I don't really care about it. Funny enough, so I bought this Dell laptop earlier this year, and when I got it, I immediately took the back off and took the NVMe drive out, put the old one in from my other computer that had Kubuntu on it. Never even ran Windows on this, just because I had no interest. And so the other day I got a wild hair, and I was like, you know what? I'm just curious. How does the hardware run? Is it going to be any different? Am I going to notice things? And so I got that old drive out and I stuck it in, and it wouldn't boot. And so I'm like, okay. So there's a recovery partition. I go into that and still won't boot. I go and I have to create an install media USB. That takes like 2 hours. I come back, I try it again, still won't boot. I'm like, all right, I'll just reinstall. So I reinstalled the whole thing. And then of course, it booted and everything. But then I had none of the drivers and none of the software. So I had to go to Dell and get 42 different drivers and
Yep.
Going through the painful setup that I know most people never go through, because you just get your computer and you don't deal with any of that. But it was almost ridiculous how many times I had to reboot, how many times I had to, and it just went on and on and on, to the point where I got to the end of it and I'm like, okay, let me test out some things. I put, some software I would normally use and, try it out. So the one thing on the system is the hybrid graphics, which admittedly under Windows, the Prime, that all just works. It's, if it needs your dedicated GPU, it uses it, and the power saving, all that stuff works really well. But honestly, I don't use that all that often. And I just found the Windows experience to be really frustrating. Things like, because it's a laptop screen, it wanted to put everything up to 125% scaling. Well, that makes everything huge. So then you lose all this screen space, but your only other option is 100%, which then makes it tiny. There's no in between. You can't adjust the font sizes. You can't do it on a case-by-case basis with different applications like you can with a lot of applications in Linux. I tried, how can I set up the sort of layouts and coloration and theming and stuff like that? It's very rudimentary. And I know there's a light theme now. So, I'm not knocking it. I think if I had to use it, I could use it. I understand it. It didn't crash. It worked. Whatever. But it made me appreciate how much control and ability to customize and make the system my own I have in Linux that just doesn't exist in Windows.
Yep. I agree. We kind of, like I said, we talk about it every week, and we kind of gloss over the fact that we have it really good in Linux. I sometimes think we don't remember all the problems we had before. So,
which is fine. I don't have a problem with selective amnesia. It's okay that we don't remember how difficult it was to deal with in the past. We can wear our rose-colored glasses and
That's
just
right.
appreciate it for what it is.
Well, you always participate in the Biddle Distro Challenge. Do you consider yourself a distro hopper?
I am a pathological distro hopper. I go beyond serial, and it's a combination of two things. One is the whole fear of missing out, and like there's something new, right? The new shiny. I have to check it out, and that's fine. I'm okay with that because now with virtualization, I can just fire up a virtual machine. It takes minutes, and I can go in and at least get the gist of like what's there, what's new, what's different. I won't know how it runs on my system, but I dual boot on my laptop, and so I always have one partition, one instance that's just kind of, I'll use it, but I don't need it. And so if something else comes up that's really cool and interesting, like when Zorin came up, I'm like, oh, this is definitely going on.
Yep.
You know, I checked it in the VirtualBox machine. I'm just like, oh, I love this, you know? And so it just, when something grabs me, then I have the ability to take it further. But at first blush, like I try everything. Like literally, if it comes up, I download the ISO. I had a 500 gig SSD in here, and I filled that up in about 2 weeks. And then I got a 1 terabyte, and it took me about 3 more weeks until that was full. I'm like, okay, I've got like literally like 48 virtual machines and like 100 ISO files. And like I need to pare this back a little bit.
You need to just clean some of that up.
But you know what's interesting? So this is something that happens all the time. I'm a serial help desk kind of guy. Like I see someone ask a question, and I'm like, okay, well, what distro are you running? What version of the distro? You know, and so I've got every Ubuntu from 1804 or 1710 through 1904. I even have 1910 on there as well. So I can just go into any of them and just get there, do what that person's doing, and see if I can recreate it or figure it out or fix it. I mean, that's part of like the videos I make and stuff like that. Almost every one of those videos you see is a virtual machine that I have sort of set up in a way that is letting me tell that story and explain the issue and how I was able to fix it. I think there's a couple that I showed my main system, but they're almost always, because it's something I found that's specific to a certain thing or is easily demonstrable in a particular system. So yeah, virtualization has made it painless. I mean, it used to be when it was full on, you know, burning a CD before USB keys, right? Before US thumb drives. So literally burning, I had those giant stack spindles of CDRs, you know, and like a box full of hundreds of them of every possible, you know, and that was painful because, you know, you'd wipe something and the installers, that I will tell you, one of the single greatest things outside of universal package formats like snaps and flatpaks and stuff is the installers nowadays. People don't know or don't remember. They were horrible. They were dangerous. They would wipe your partitions. They would do horrible things to your system without telling you they were doing that. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, I was trying to dual boot, but I guess I'm running this now because that installation is completely gone. Fortunately, I'm smart enough to back up my files somewhere else. But, you know, oh, those days it was painful. And now, I mean, it's literally, you know, zero risk, just fire it up and see how it runs.
Well, the worst thing that happens in an installer nowadays is it fails to install, but it doesn't actually destroy anything. Right. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, we've come a long way, dude.
We really have. We really have. Even though I have a main system that is sort of my dedicated one, it's usually almost always Ubuntu based, but really what I hop around is the new release of a desktop environment. That's really what still to this day, I mean, so the underpinnings are important and there's system based stuff that I do, but that's, if it's Ubuntu, it's going to do what I need it to do. And that's why I continue to use it, but it's the desktop environment. And, you know, I use either Cinnamon or Plasma, mostly Plasma. And a lot of that has to do with excellent file managers, as we well know, the two best. Although
Dolphin,
I don't single click, you savage.
Come on, dude. I can't understand you. I don't understand the idea of why you would want to double click something when all you have to do is single click it.
You know what it is? It's clicking to select is really what. So in single click, whenever I forget that, and it's like I click it to select it and I go into it and I'm like, what happened? Where am I?
Yes, but if I want to select it, I just hold Control and click it.
It's okay. Different strokes.
It's okay if you.
That's
wrong.
Why there's a setting, right?
That's right. You can have what you want, and I can have what I want.
Exactly.
All right. So you mentioned KDE, Plasma, and Cinnamon. You have to make a choice, dude. Which one's your favorite?
Visually, Cinnamon and GTK based desktops, for whatever reason, I just think they go to 11 for me. Right?
Yeah.
Plasma's 10, and for whatever reason, they just crank it one extra notch. It's theming, it's font rendering. It's little things that just are a little bit cleaner, a little bit smoother and softer. And Cinnamon is, it's everything I could want, because it is the menu I like. It's the file manager I like. The settings are just where they need to be. It's somewhere between the unbelievable amount of settings in Plasma and the no settings or very few settings in something like GNOME, where it's kind of the nexus between those things. You've got all of the settings you need, but very few that you don't, and everything just works. And so I think Cinnamon, if I were to just say, what's the prettiest, or which the one that I look at and I go, wow, I really like how that looks, it's Cinnamon. But Plasma is just so good. I mean, so good with all of the options and all of the, there's very rarely that I can't get something done that I need to do on Plasma, because it can do it.
Plasma has so much innovation, so many features that nobody thought of yet. And they put it in there, it's like,
I'll tell you what I missed. So I did this round robin thing where I blame Zorin for this. I was a happy Kubuntu user, and then Zorin came along. So I went to Zorin, and it didn't run great because it was an LTS base. So then I did Ubuntu, and then I went to Pop. So I was installing the Zorin theming on top of it and enjoying it, because it made GNOME into something that was more familiar and accessible to me. But at the end of the day, it still wasn't, there was just something I was missing, and I realized, it's because I love Cinnamon. Mint 19.2 came out. I'm like, yeah, this is definitely going on. And for whatever reason, they're on an LTS base, but it still ran really great on my hardware. And that's right now I'm dual booting Kubuntu 19.04 and Mint 19.2 Cinnamon. So I'll flip back between them, and it's a hard toss up.
It is. Again, I got to go back to, we're in such a good time in Linux right now.
You can't go wrong. That whole discussion about what would you do if your distro disappeared. Now someone else started a new one about what would you do if your desktop environment disappeared. Would I be happy about it? No, not really. But it doesn't mean that I couldn't do all of the things that I do now and use all of the same applications, and
Yep.
It all just sort of works. So when, I know we'll talk about this a little bit more about the community, but this is the type of stuff that drives me crazy about the tribalism, and someone saying, well, GNOME this or KDE that or XFCE or what. They're all wonderful. They are all better than they have ever been. They're all, I contend that they are the single greatest experience you can have on a desktop PC. They do things that no other operating system does. Are they perfect? No, but none are. I just installed Windows 10, which is supposed to be like the pinnacle, right? Unless you're a Mac fan. And I had all kinds of issues and things that I couldn't do that I wanted to do, that I came back into Linux, and it was like, I'm home. This just makes sense to me. It works for me. And honestly, with most things being web-based now, or Electron, or like having, or an app or a Snap or a Flatpak, there's almost nothing you can't get and do. And with the advent of Steam and Proton and Vulkan, like, it's amazing some of these things that are happening right now. And I can really see that being a driving factor for a larger adoption, or publishers thinking, this is something we can actually do now and maybe make some money doing.
Well, that's key. That's the key. I think that before the adoption comes, the companies have to get behind Linux. And I think with all of these advancements, I think you're going to see some of that.
They took something that was impossibly complex, like gaming, hardware intensive, all the things that are very difficult to achieve, and have made, unbelievable strides in a short amount of time. And that's that's really the lesson I think that exists, is that if you can find the right group of people that are interested and motivated, they can do it. There are
Yep.
no excuses. There's no technical limitation that says you can't do these things.
All right, so let's switch over to your YouTube channel. You've been running Linux for a long time. You decide to make a YouTube channel. What made you decide to concentrate on tutorials for your channel?
I think it's a lot of just what I find interesting. And also, I think the single greatest thing that puzzles me a lot of times is I'll have a problem, which I just have to assume everybody or most people have. And then I go and I search for a solution and I can't even find it. Or if I can, there's almost no information, or it's some like, Stack Exchange post, or just like there's just nothing really good out there that sort of explains how this works. And so if I'm able to fix that, figure it out, then I think, well, this is probably something that's useful to someone else. Even though there's not already 100 videos on it, or, blog posts or forum posts or whatever, Reddit, there's got to be someone out there that's having this issue, right? Not just me.
I feel that way though so many times though when I search for problems, and I know like I come up with like some of the most ridiculous problems ever, but I do feel that way. It is my specialty. But I feel that way often, that like I can't be the only one, but yet I can't find nothing on it. So
yeah, it really kind of baffles me. And so that's really what started me even thinking. Like, I think the first few videos I did were just literally things that, as I was installing and trying out new things, it was like, I'm surprised this isn't out there, and I'm just gonna. And I also like the idea of learning by teaching others, and so the tone I try to set, and I'm still trying to find my voice and really get comfortable and relax, and give it some space, and not just like go crazy. There's something funny about, my wife says this to me, like when I turn on the microphone, or I start streaming, or whatever, like I go into this, I have a deeper voice, and she's like, what are you doing? What are you talking about? She's like, listen to your voice when you do that. And she's right. I go an octave, or not an octave, but I go deeper.
Yeah.
I get louder. I project. Even when I'm talking on the phone, like
it's that teaching thing, dude.
Yeah. So I'm still trying to get comfortable, find my rhythm, find my voice. But what I'd like to have people believe and feel is that I'm literally sitting right there with them. I want to feel like it's you and me, and we're just talking about something. And, this is maybe a problem you've found my video, and I'm just going to tell you about like what I've figured out, how I did it. Here's some resources if you need to do further research. And I want to engage with people in the comments and, social media if they're interested. I have a genuine interest and get great satisfaction out of helping people overcome challenges. I'm a Mr. Fix-It guy. My wife absolutely hates it because she just wants to complain to me sometimes and tell me like, I don't like this, I don't like that. And I can't just go, oh, you're right, that's terrible. I go, well, we could do this, or what, and she's just like, will you stop? Like, I'm trying to I'm venting here. All right. It's like, I'm not asking you to fix anything. So that's just my personality. Someone tells me they have a problem, or I see a problem, like my reaction is I have, if I can, I want to help and do something.
Yep. Well, I love your content, dude, because it provides solutions to problems for people that are not easily found, like we were just talking about. Like, I mean, you have videos on your channel like adjusting your mouse wheel speed in Linux, enabling touchpad swipe gestures in Linux, and going from that, you have like a video on DuckDuckGo bangs. It's like there's so many different things there that you're talking about, and that's what's awesome, because those type of videos are what I was looking for when I'm trying to find solutions to my problems and I can't find them.
Yeah. Well, so what you're demonstrating there, what I'm demonstrating is, number one, I'm very picky about things. So the fact that, my mouse wheel was too slow, right? Some people might just be like, oh, well, it's too slow. Like me, I'm like, this is driving me crazy. There's got to be a way to fix this. And, and that's where, I am wheel came from. I dug around until I found something that worked for me. The gestures. This is something, I think that, not to get off on a complete tangent here, but the fact that PC sales nowadays, the overwhelming majority of PCs are laptops, right?
Right.
And the fact that distribution ship with what I would consider to be very poor laptop support, for the most part, not entirely. So some of them do a good job putting some thought into it. Pop! OS is a great example, right? And that,
agreed, totally agreed.
They're a hardware manufacturer, of course they have, but they've put a lot of thought into the drivers and the power saving and all that sort of stuff. But others don't, and it drives me wild. And it's like, how is it that I can be on a Windows PC or Windows OS or Mac and everything? Of course the input works. It's the way you use the computer, and the fact that swiping and all that stuff doesn't exist or isn't configured for you is just, it's silly. It's like, Katie, still Plasma. Tap to click is not enabled by default. You have to press the click. That drives me absolutely bananas. Now, I know that there are people that prefer that. Great, that's fine. But I think as a default, it's kind of silly because I sit there and actually touch the touchpad and I'm like, why isn't this working? Why isn't this? Oh, that's right, it's not on. So then I'm going to click and, So it's things like that I get really picky about that will drive me crazy. And that's where some of those come from. And the banks thing, the DuckDuck banks, I just thought this is cool and I use it all the time. Like for if I'm working on like a web project and I'm trying to look up a CSS property or something, like I just do bang MDN space whatever I'm looking for, and it's right there in front of me. It's awesome. It's dumb. It's easy. It's not even anything that interesting, but to me, I use it all the time, and it's useful. So it's
useful to somebody. Yeah. That's the key,
right?
What are your long-term goals for the channel? Will you stay with this type of content, or you got different plans for the future?
Well, I never seem to run out of these types of things. So yeah, I probably will continue to have lots of those types of videos. But, like I said, as I get more comfortable, I would like to offer some more sort of general knowledge and maybe even some opinion-based stuff. But I want to keep it positive. And I want to keep it constructive, and I really have no interest in ever being negative or confrontational or anything like that. But I do feel like I have such a rich history that there are things, I think my perspective has some merit. Like this is so egotistical and ridiculous, but I almost never watched the Biddle streams right after they're done because I was there. I mean, what's the point?
Right.
But every now and then I'll think, what were we talking about? And I'll go back and I'll watch. And, I've done public speaking. I've been okay at it. I feel like I present myself fairly well. I feel like I'm articulate enough, whatever. But when I see myself and I'm actually like engaged and I'm really passionate about what I'm talking about, like, it's like, wow, okay, I can do this. Like, this is something that not only can I do, but I feel like I'm coming across in a approachable way, in a way that shows that I care and that I'm interested. And so when I see those types of things, I think, well, maybe this is something I can expand on outside of Biddle, where I'm, giving my opinion on something, but it's a considered opinion, and it's, like I said, polite, and maybe polite's the wrong word. It's positive, right?
Right.
I think you can be constructive and potentially, contradict people and things like that, but still be positive. So I mean, I see the possibility of that. And, I was a guest host, just happenstance on Destination Linux. And that was something I really enjoyed, mainly because those guys are so great, and it's just, they're basically friends.
Right.
But, the idea that I could.
Sometimes they're great.
Well, they're. Some of them are great. Let me say I've been missing Zeb. No, I love them all. They're wonderful.
Get a rise out of Ryan.
Yeah, even Michael, I love. So that was very enjoyable to me, and so I never really thought about, is this something that I would be interested in doing? But having done it, even for that short amount of time, like it has sparked some kind of interest in me. So maybe that's something I do. And then I also really enjoy like Steve's streams and Toss's streams and stuff like that, where I could see myself picking up topic and just kind of going on a little ramble and see who wants to come by and say hi. It's giving me a way to connect with people, and that's really what I think it is. So the tutorials are safe, right? I mean, it's easy for me to be, to draw from my experience, to just sort of have put together some ideas and thoughts on something and just put that out there almost in a dispassionate way. And the difference between that and something that is a little more engaging, like a stream, or something where I'm trying to impart maybe more of my own opinion on something, that feels a little riskier, and it feels like something that takes a little more time to get comfortable with. And but I think as I continue, the bottom line is I'm really enjoying it. I'm getting nothing out of it other than enjoying the fact that I'm doing it and that some people are watching it and giving me positive feedback. And that's really all the motivation I need at this point.
All right, let's take it back to Linux a little bit. I'm told that workflow is just a buzzword. But I don't consider that. I don't believe that. But do you have a daily workflow with a desktop layout maybe, or even like software that you use?
Yeah, the workflow itself, it's really more about how many icons can I stuff down into my, my launcher bar. It's just all the programs that I need and use. Like if I look at what I have now, so all the web-based stuff, Firefox I have to have with the extensions that I use. And that just is the web to me. I mean, I use Chrome and other things to test if I need to, but really, I mean, Firefox is probably the single most used application on my system. But then stuff like FileZilla, which is an FTP application, which I've used for years, and someday I'm gonna have to find who makes it and like buy them many kegs of beer or something. Joplin for taking notes, VS Code for code editing, Typora for Markdown. So it's just this series of productivity apps, and that's all on sort of the web and work side of things. And then for content, Simple Screen Recorder, I absolutely love OBS, Olive Video Editor, Zoom, for this kind of stuff, right. Telegram, Discord, and they're all here, and they're all in every system I need, whether I'm trying something that has a native package or I'm using a Flatpak or an app image. I mean, those days of having to pick a distro based on the software that was available or the versions of software that were available, I feel like they're pretty close to just being behind us.
Yep.
So, but yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that I have to have, like, I know some people, especially like tiling window managers, or, they have a very specific like flow. They've got 16 terminals open, or they've got all these different things. And, there are times where I kind of get into a project where I really do sort of say this desktop is this thing. So I do use virtual desktops. But otherwise, I mean, I don't have like a strict, like it has to be this way or I can't get things done.
So you mentioned all of that software. Is there any software that is not available on Linux that you'd like to see be on Linux?
I'd love to see all software available on Linux. I mean, is that so much to ask? Or,
yeah, it is.
I think having the choice, having the option, the fact that was a huge limiting factor for me for such a long time that kept me from using Linux on a regular basis, especially in a professional environment. And I think a lot of the people I talk to that still use Windows or that are in the IT space, there is a certain requirement in many cases to use Windows, especially on the desktop side of things, because it's where the enterprise still is. And honestly, I'm not a Windows hater. I'm not a Office hater. I'm not a proprietary software closed source hater. I wish everything was open source and was available and free because I think things would innovate more quickly in a lot of cases. But I get why companies don't do that. Open source is still a tough racket to make money in.
Yep, it is.
You're basically selling services, not software, and those are companies that are selling software. And they're selling both, but I mean, the software usually comes with the service, but without that license or that subscription, that's where they're making their money. So I don't think they see a path between where they are and where they might end up or could be. Although, all the things that Microsoft have been doing, people can be cynical, but the reality is they're a corporation that's going to follow the money, and their customers are saying, we want to use Linux. We want to use it on your Azure platform. We want some of your tools to work on Linux. We want Windows for subsystem for Linux on, and there are things changing that in the Ballmer era, hell would have frozen over before any of those things were even possible. And the reality is like that the market force has driven people towards that and companies towards that. And so, like I said, with Proton and Steam and Vulkan, and today I just saw that NVIDIA's new beta release of their drivers actually supports Prime offloading on Linux. Like
wow.
without Bumblebee, without hacks, without, like it's just there. And you need an updated version of Xorg and stuff but they're doing it.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, that's so cool. That's yet another thing. And maybe that's just pressure because they're feeling pressure from AMD or whatever's happening there. It doesn't matter. I don't care. The benefit is that we get to benefit from it. So, that's the thing. I think Linux has proven itself to be a stable platform. And really, if it comes down to a matter of like packaging software and making it work, but it comes down to the demand. I understand why companies don't do it.
It all comes down to the dollar, dude.
Yeah. People have to make money.
You got to make money. So
free software is free as in beer software is kind of I don't know. It's always bugged me a little bit because I've always thought like, how do these people either make money doing this and feed their families, or how do they stay motivated? And there's a lot of ways that happens. But when they actually are upfront and honest about like, hey, we need some money, because this isn't free, and people are like, well, I'm not giving them money. But you've used their software and you use it all the time, and you probably even make money off of it yourself because you're providing a service to someone else. And how is it not fair that sort of channels back a little bit?
But it should be each individual's choice to do that. Like, I am a complete supporter for supporting the programs that you use on Linux. Whatever it may be. If I use Kdenlive, or if I use this program, I want to support that program. Okay.
Right.
So, but I don't want it to be a situation where somebody else has to support them. If you know what I mean, it should be a choice. It should be a personal choice. I wish everybody felt the same way, where they would want to support their whatever software there is that they use, but I don't think it should be a have to.
No, and I don't think there should be an expectation on the developer's part as well. But what I do think would be great is if you look at something like Kdenlive, there's got to be at least I'm going to just say 500,000 users conservatively, right? And maybe that isn't conservative. Maybe that's wildly overblown. Let's say there's 100,000 users, right? Whatever. If a percentage of them would give $1, all of a sudden that's real money, right? Yep. And it's not going to kill people to give $1. It's just not. Or $5, or, and I'm not trying to brag or I'm not a rich man, but when there's something that comes up like the new version of LatteDoc, I threw the guy $20 because I'm like, this is amazing. I know you've spent like hundreds of hours doing this. I'm going to use it, and it's incredible. Like you deserve this $20. Like yes, I'm sure I could spend it on lots of things, but like, Mozilla, I know that they get funded and everything, but I believe in what they do. Flawed as it may be, I give them $5 a month because I don't ever want to see that software disappear, because it would negatively impact me in a very big way. So things like that, like I really try to throw out a couple extra bucks. If it's the difference between me going out for a meal that I probably shouldn't be eating anyway, and giving that money to a project that could really benefit from it. I mean, that might be like naive or, altruistic or whatever, but I think if more people were to just think about the fact that this software comes from somebody, probably a very talented somebody who makes a lot of, maybe, a lot more money in their career than they ever could doing open source, has chosen to do this out of love, out of interest, out of whatever. And if you use it, and especially if you make money from it, that's the thing, really. So when you see companies like Amazon and Google and Microsoft and all these cloud-based systems using free and open source software to make billions of dollars, I just wish some of that would trickle backward. And some of it does, but I wish a greater, more equitable percentage of it would go back to those people who spent their time and energy and love and passion putting it together.
Well, you mentioned all that, and a good friend, Michael Tunnell, recently gave a talk itself about how bad Linux is as a whole on marketing itself. Mm. Do you agree with this? Do you believe that?
Oh, I agree with it and I believe it, but I also don't agree that it needs to market itself. And who are you marketing yourself to? I think the reason that more people don't know about Linux is because it's just not an option when they're buying a computer. People don't download operating systems and install them on their computers. The vast majority of people don't do that and never will. No matter how beneficial or appealing that might be, it's a lot of work. And if you're a non-technical person, it's scary and risky and probably not something that you're going to greatly benefit from without someone helping you through that. So the idea that there are people out there that are willing to help, or that if you have a family member or a friend or someone that you can directly engage with and maybe help them, it's very grassroots, right? I mean, that's kind of where I see growth, the potential for growth. And I mean, so System 76, the fact that Dell has their new Inspira Online with Ubuntu going on it, Lenovo and HP, and there's some other manufacturers it's there, it's a thing. And I think developers and designers, web people, there's a contingent of people now that really do appreciate and want to use Linux. So there is some growth, but the PC market is still shrinking because most normal people are just going to use a laptop, or they're going to use a tablet or a phone or something like that. So, who are you marketing to? I guess that's what it comes down to. Because I just don't see any, the idea of the year of the Linux desktop. It's never going to happen. It was a fallacy to begin with, because without getting it on the point of sale, the hardware that the people are buying, it was never going to happen. And really, to me, the year of the Linux desktop is when someone is introduced to it and enjoys it and embraces it for themselves. That is their year of the desktop, right? If that is the year that they decide that's what they're going to use, and they stick with it and they enjoy it and grow and learn, that happens. It's a personal thing. There is no universal, the world is going to experience a year of the Linux desktop.
Well, I think that is the one question that everybody has a different answer for. And do I think that we'll ever have a year of the Linux desktop? I think it's just, again, I'll go back to what you said. It's more about the personal experience than it is about Linux as a whole. It's about each individual that makes up the community and when and where they started in Linux that makes it special. I mean, the masses are never going to embrace Linux.
No.
It's just not going to happen. But the special thing is when, say, last year, I decided to run Linux. That's awesome. You know what I mean? That's something that people can get behind. We have Biddle members that just recently in the last few months came to Linux.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That makes it the year of the Linux desktop.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying, that grassroots approach where you hear about it from somewhere, you see you can attend a Linux meetup, you can find a community like Biddle that, generates your interest whenever you're searching around, like for what is Linux, which, the more positive content that's out there, the more engaging content, especially for lesser technical users or new users, the more likely that those things will happen. So is that marketing? I mean, maybe it is. Maybe that's what constitutes marketing, is putting out good, friendly, approachable content and trying to drive away some of the more scary sort of, you need to be an expert, or you need to be,
Yep.
It doesn't hurt that you have an interest in learning and maybe trying to fix some problems. But you're right. I mean, you said earlier, I mean, there are systems, versions of Linux, distros of Linux that are, I mean, they're as easy, at least from my perspective, as Mac and Windows, if not easier.
Yep. If not easier. I would say definitely some of them are easier, especially to install.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right. Community. It's the best thing about Linux.
Can be.
But it can be. We might get into that. But there are other reasons to use Linux. Like, people talk about open source software. They talk about, you talked about customizing KDE. That was like one of the cool things about it. Mm-hmm. But what drives your passion or your love for Linux?
I think it's just my deep down love of new and interesting technology. Being able to directly benefit from someone else's creativity and passion and interest in some just randomly cool thing for maybe no seemingly good reason, but the evolution of things. I mean, like I said, it still just blows my mind to see how far it's come. I mean, I guess 10 years sounds like a long time. Hell, I'd even say 5 years, honestly. I mean,
yes,
5 years ago it wasn't as good as it is now. So I mean,
I would say 2 years ago it wasn't as good as it was.
Yeah, well, I remember Kubuntu's 16 series, and yeah, it was not fun. And I'm not calling them out specifically. I'm just saying, like, there were definitely some rough patches. I mean, when Unity was dying out. I mean, there were just lots of turmoil and things that happened. But yeah, I mean, it's just endlessly fascinating to me that people give so freely of their time. And, they all have different motivations for it. Maybe it's not the most like altruistic goal that they have in mind. Maybe they're trying to earn a job somewhere and demonstrate their capabilities. I mean, there might be a lot of different reasons for it, but the end result is that you get these projects like KDE and like GNOME and all of these. I mean, and so someone mentioned the other day, like Kdenlive, right? Kdenlive is so widely used, and really it seems like it's just one person that does most of the work. Sure, there are other people committing and testing and everything else, but in terms of the commits and the person doing the development, and you think that's phenomenal, because I mean, I've had my problems with it, and I don't use it that often. I mean, I still go back and look at the new versions, and I'm sure it's going to improve over time. But just the fact that someone's able to do that is, and have that be out there where so many people can experience it and use it that's pretty powerful. It's pretty special.
Yep. Well, you alluded earlier to the fact that, sometimes the community is fun, interactive, nice. But what has been your overall experience with the community? Toxic, friendly, what?
Yeah, for most of my tenure, I would say it's been toxic to the point where I just didn't even see the reason to try to engage. I would look at news sites and things and forums and Reddit and all the rest of it just to kind of understand where we were and what was new and what was happening. But I saw so much vitriol and just negativity, and we've been using the term tribalism. I mean, it just so much of like, if you don't like what I like, you're wrong.
Right.
Or if you do it a different way, it's the wrong way. And not only is it wrong, but you're stupid, or some like slander, it's not enough to just like what you like. You have to tear down other things that are competing with it. And so,
Well, I want to clarify something here, because you said that, and when there's a certain amount of humor and joking, sarcastic joking sometimes in relationships. So like when we talked earlier about the single click, double click, me and you are joking back and forth.
Right.
But in no way would we have that conversation in a real sense with somebody, as far as you're wrong for using single click or you're wrong for using double click.
Right. Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
It's a meme. It's a community meme. It's something that we say to each other. But no, I would never. I mean, I might tell someone they have the option between a single and a double click if they care. Maybe they don't. And so, but I would never. And this is just me as a person. I'm just not that kind of person. I'm not the type of person that's going to criticize you for something that it may not appeal to me or be something that I'm interested in, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't have merit or that it's wrong or bad. I mean, I have a very hard time with the world in general because I just don't operate on the same way. Like, I'm the guy at the party, everybody's running around having fun, and I'm the guy in the corner, like, trying to have a conversation with you, and you're like, who is this guy? Or, it's just how I've always been, and it's not that I'm not a fun guy and like, I'm not going to, go crazy every now and then, but I'd rather have a connection with someone and have an honest conversation and understand you. I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to look at you and make a predetermination. If I'm not saying I'm like some superhuman being that doesn't have these feelings, but I try my best to be compassionate and empathetic and understand other people, and not just assume that like, oh, well, they're not worth my time, or they're wrong, or they're stupid, or whatever.
Right.
Negative thing. And so when I see that kind of behavior, now a lot of it I think is just because the anonymity of the internet allows people to act like jerks, and there's no repercussion whatsoever other than you just say that guy's an idiot, or you block them or whatever.
Yeah.
But there's nobody that's going to like punch them in the face or, like make them stop doing it because they're being mean. And I honestly think that most of these people aren't that way, like in person. Like if that was true, if people were as negative and angry and mean as they were on the internet, then you would see them more often, and I think people's tendencies whenever they're looking at you face to face is to connect with you. But the internet has a way of dehumanizing people and I can't go there. I can't engage with it. I can't do it.
So what do we as a community need to do to make the experience better?
I think it's trying to put out as much positive energy and content and connections, and do everything we can to spread, the idea that there is a contingent of people that do not think this way, that do not act this way, that genuinely enjoy not only using, Linux and open source and, all of that, but that there is a community out there of people that are just genuinely decent, friendly people who are fun to talk to and engage with, and who are creating positive things and sharing positive things. And I'd like to believe that that's going to somehow outweigh the negative or the sensationalistic. I know it's not, but I think if someone were searching and just looking and happened to come across, so I mean, my own, I talk about the negativity of the community and why I never engaged, but what happened for me late last year was I found Michael Tunnell's, This Week in Linux, and I started watching it because I had gotten back into Linux and had been using it on a regular basis and started looking for current events and when it was interested. And so I found him, and then I realized that he was involved with Destination Linux. And so I started watching that and listening to that and sort of hearing other names and getting other recommendations. And it felt like as soon as I aligned myself with that content, all of a sudden the other stuff I was seeing was of the same sort of tone. Of course the sensational ones will pop up or the, whatever, but I started to recognize and know like, oh, well, okay, I know who this is now, and was able to sort of navigate my way through. And then once I figured out they had talked about, oh, this Rocco guy, started Destination Linux, and it was like, then I found Biddle, and, I think within the second or third show after watching it, I was jumping into Zoom, and I mean, it felt so comfortable and so like everybody's real and is doing it because they enjoy doing it, because they want to see these people. And so that really, in terms of how do we spread the love and engage the community, it worked for me. Maybe I was a little more persistent, maybe I was lucky, but I think if that content's out there, if those connections can be made that connect those people, this guy to that guy to that guy to that guy, and you start to realize, oh, there is a community. Like there are people out here that are worth talking to, and that's been my experience.
Yep, we just need time in order for the community, the good parts of the community, to grow and outweigh the bad parts.
Yeah.
So, you've been using Linux for a long time, so you've obviously run into problems.
Mm.
So do you have a story on the most exciting problem you solved in Linux?
So, I'd love to believe that, I've swooped in and saved the day time after time. But the reality is that I'm cautious enough and smart enough to think of problems before they happen. So to disaster recovery, being, prepared for the worst case scenario, not losing data, making quadruple backups, just being ridiculous to the point of, but I'll tell you what, it is so satisfying when someone has a problem. My wife loses a file and she's like, what am I supposed to do? And I'm like, well, if it's backed up, I've got it. She's like, you have it? And it's like, yes, I do. And I can just give it to her. And it's in so taking the steps to do something in a way that's sort of regimented, and you put the thought into like, what could go wrong and how can I mitigate that risk? That's really satisfying to me, because I was the guy that never got viruses on Windows. Everybody was like, I got this Trojan virus to drive by I literally, I'm seriously, I cannot remember ever once getting a virus on my Windows PCs. And that's just because I am cautious and I am careful and I think about what I'm doing, and I try to, it's not that I haven't made mistakes, but I have a backup. So When I do something stupid, I can go, oh, and it comes back. So that to me is more exciting and sort of rewarding, especially over time, than just being able to be like, I fixed it, And there's certainly been times where, and I'll go back to the days of when it was difficult to install something, getting your Xorg config just right, or getting your sound card to work, or getting your peripherals to work, or your printer, like whatever it was, like getting a full system set up was an accomplishment back in the day, and I took great satisfaction in that. But I've also changed as a person. When I was young, I could fiddle with something for days and days and days and never get tired of it. Now I'm kind of like, if it takes me more than about 15 minutes sometimes, especially if it's something really stupid that should just work.
Work. If
I'm trying to do something special, I get it, right? Like I'm trying to do something that's not a common use case, and okay, this is not going to work easily. I get that. Like Zeb with 3 monitors and all the crazy stuff he's doing, Like he has the patience to do those things because he wants the end result of that. Is that a typical case? Maybe, maybe not. But it's he sees the value in doing it. So he understands when that doesn't work, right? He doesn't get mad about it necessarily. And that's kind of how I feel. If it's something that should just work and it doesn't, then in the past I would have been like, oh, let's figure out why this isn't working. Now I'm just like, I find it more and more difficult to invest that kind of time and energy. So as I'm lucky because Linux is easier to use now, because honestly, if it was still like it used to be, I might not be having this conversation right now.
I love it. All right. Well, if you could change one thing about Linux, what would it be?
I think, just to allude back to what I was talking about earlier, the idea that nothing is free. We live in a world where we've been trained to believe that things are free that really we're now starting to figure out aren't free. Like I read something today about there's testimony about big tech, and I know big tech is like the favorite whipping boy right now, but the idea that algorithms are created to make you feel bad for not saying yes to everything. You want to quit Facebook, it's going to show you the faces of the 5 people it thinks you most love in this world, and it's going to say, are you sure you want to leave these people behind? And there's sort of like scummy, predatory practices that these companies undertake, and it's not free. It's just not. They may not charge you money for it, but that doesn't mean it's free. And so the idea that when someone uses free and open source software and they either disrespect it by, not valuing it, criticizing it unnecessarily, being overly negative, maybe not contributing back to something either financially or with their time and energy or promoting it, free does just not exist as in free as in beer. It just doesn't. It's magic that people are willing to do this and spend their time doing it. But I think it's just not sustainable. When people complain about bugs or they're like, oh, I love that project and now it's gone, or, people can only do these things on being motivated by the interest in doing it for so long. At some point it becomes a thing, and that thing has to contribute to their lives in some way. And unfortunately the world is, you got to have money to live.
Right.
So that's probably the thing I would change the most, is for people to understand that this software doesn't just magically appear, that there are lots of very talented, dedicated, passionate people putting their heart and soul into it, and that it's the least we could do to thank them, to be, constructive when we have to be critical, and when we can support them, whether that's your time, energy, money, whatever that is.
I'll go back to what Ryan said. Ryan has been saying for a long time now, even a simple thank you goes a long way. And I get it that people still need, to live and still need donations, but not everybody needs to give donations. You give donations, somebody else gives time, somebody else gives a thank you, and it all works together to help that person continue on doing what he's doing. I mean, for example, XFCE just came out with 4.14. Mm-hmm. Okay. It's been how many years since they've been trying to put this thing out? But this is a group of people that put their heart and soul into it, but they also have real lives too. Mm-hmm. And they're trying to balance those real lives along with creating all of this awesome software. So it's like, how can you not appreciate that? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. And, I am not a huge fan of XFCE. I don't dislike it. It's just not the one that seems to click with me the best. It's completely usable and functional and stable and all of those things. But I would never just say it's bad, because it's not bad.
Right.
Just because it's not something that appeals to me directly, it's not like I installed it and it was ransomware and encrypted my files, or I paid $1,000 for it and it doesn't do the thing that I wanted it to do. Or, the idea that people I mean, it just makes my head hurt. And I literally, there are times where I have to just not look at Twitter, not look at Telegram, not look at anything. I just need a break because, I mean, I get overly sensitive. I really do, because it just builds up. It builds up. It's like the boiler's about to burst, and I have to walk away because one more dumb, oh, KDE sucks or gnomes. It's like I can't take it after a certain point. So yeah, you're right. I mean, these people earnestly and honestly put their heart and soul into these things, and for people to just be stupidly critical for no purpose whatsoever other than to just make noise, it's very, very saddening. And I hope that they know that those people aren't coming from a place of real authority or interest or trying to be constructive in any way. They're just being noisy. And I think that a lot of these guys, I've seen developers say, you got to have a thick skin because you get it from every direction. And so I would hate to think that somebody who's put a lot of energy and interest and passion into something gets disheartened by those types of people, because Lord knows there are enough of them out there.
Well, have no fear, brother. We are changing things.
We are.
We are changing things for the positive, for the better. And we're going to get there. Just saying.
Absolutely.
So thinking back for the reasons that you chose to use Linux, do those reasons still apply today?
Yes, because honestly, I would say, I read something the other day about somebody's experience, and I have to agree that one of the things that Windows that kind of drove me crazy was it was what it was. And if you wanted to fundamentally change things, you really just couldn't do it. There were some third-party things you could do that would, enhance or in some way alter, but fundamentally, you just couldn't change things. It never felt like it was your own. I could change the wallpaper. I could maybe change the theme slightly.
Very slightly.
But it just never felt like I could make it what I wanted it to be. And from those earliest days, even when I had problems and it wasn't easy, I recognized in Linux the idea that it was individual, it was expressive, it was gave you the ability to make it what you wanted it to be, whether that was something that someone else would look at and go, wow, that's something. or you'd look at Unix porn and on Reddit and you see these people who go to extreme lengths to come up with the most amazing, incredible systems that are, I mean, it's a labor of love, and it lets you do that. It lets you express yourself and use your computer. We use the term personal computer, and I think you can. It's not like it's disingenuous to say that, because it is your computer, but the idea that you could really personalize it. Once I realized that was something that I could do, I mean, even just this latest foray, the last few days back into Windows, and realizing yes, they added a light theme, and I could tell it to pick, colors from the background and use it on title bars. But it's so barely lets you change things the way you want it to. The touchpad, I'm not trying to rant here, but I mean, touchpad, so the swipe gestures usually are going to be, and Mac does this too, back and forward in a browser, right?
Yeah.
Windows, no, that's switch applications. You can't change it. So, but I hope you like it that way, because it doesn't work any other way. And I'm sure someone's going to go, well, you're controlling. All I'm saying is I tried to do it. It wasn't easy, and there was no immediate, way to do it. So anyway, right. Linux, to me, the magic has always been, if you're willing to take the time, it's going to meet you more than halfway on letting you do what you want to do.
I don't disagree. I mean, I started on KDE. The reason that I started on KDE was because I could customize it. You know what I mean? That was the whole purpose. I had window blinds. Fences, I think I had too, whatever, some other program.
On Windows? Yeah.
But nothing could compare to customizing it like you could in KDE, and that's what drew me to Linux. So, yeah.
To this day, so things like tabbed file manager. There's a Groupie by Stardock is something you can get on Windows, and it comes close to approximating, but it's an extra thing, and it's, you got to pay for it, and it's not just there. So
right.
Yeah, I mean, there's just something so satisfying about just, I mean, you're saying, back in the day, I think of like KDE with wobbly windows and the desktop cube, and like it was all so silly, and like it didn't really.
But it was awesome, dude.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it didn't do anything, but it was just. I saw a video the other day of guys still using wobbly windows. I'm like, keep the dream alive, brother.
When I'm on KDE, I use wobbly windows.
Do you really?
I really do use wobbly windows when I'm running
goodness.
KDE, because I think KDE, to be honest with you, has the best default setup of them. Like when you use other programs to enable wobbly windows, like it just doesn't feel right. Like it just. But for KDE, it just has that swoosh.
No, I agree. Like it belongs on KDE, no doubt. And it's right there if you want to dig 6 layers down in the settings. It's
there, brother. If you want it, it's there.
That's right. I think the cube's still there too, if you want.
I never really got into the cube. I mean, I know that like it was there and it was cool. Like it was a cool thing, but I never actually used it. You know what I mean?
I had the 6 sides, baby. All around. Look out.
I watch videos and I look at it like, man, that is so cool, but I don't use it. Like.
Oh, yeah.
All right, man. Is there anything else you'd like to share with people?
What are we at? About 2.5 hours now? So.
Almost.
Yeah, but let's not.
All right. So how can people get in touch with you?
So, I'm on Biddle every week, or I'm on the Discourse or Telegram. My main social media is Twitter. It's just the one that agrees with me. Are you going to put links in the video, or do you want me to say them? Or
I will. I'll put links in them, but you can say them if you like. Rocco's
going to make it easy for you. So it's Eric S. Adams at Twitter. I don't even know my Mastodon one. I'm there. Feel free to reach out to me. There'll be a link. It's there.
It's all right there.
YouTube. If you want to come check out my goofy videos, feel free. And like at this point, I'm trying to build enough of an audience to have people feed me ideas so that I can. Because I have tons of ideas. I just never know if they're any good.
See, I think you should just put out the videos that you have the ideas on, and people will respond to them.
Yeah,
that's what I think.
All right. I trust you, Rocco. I'll do it.
All right, man. That wraps it up. Thank you so much, Eric, for joining us.
I could literally do this every day with you. That's true. So, if you're ever bored,
we'll do it again.
Yeah. And honestly, for folks, I mean, we're preaching the choir here, but seriously, we've got great things going on with Biddle, with Discourse and Discord and Telegram. You said Discord's been picking up lately, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah, there is probably, I don't know, anywhere between 5 and 10 people in on a given night.
Yeah. So we're out there. Come say hi.
Yep, do it. All right. That's going to wrap it up. Thank you all for joining us this week as we spotlight the best thing about Linux, our community. Until next time, long live Linux. So, it's recording. Say something.
Hi, my name's Eric Adams. I live in Sarasota, Florida. I drive a 2010 Volkswagen GTI. Too fast sometimes. I'm a big dork who loves Linux and makes goofy YouTube videos that 5 people watch.
There's more than 5 people. Come on.
Okay, 25.
All right. All right.
Okay. That's better. Not really, but okay.
Actually, you should lower it so that you're even with me. Yeah. No, I mean, you're good. That was good right there. Like right there. Yeah. Yep. Perfect.
Awesome.
That way we're kind of even. That way you're not like.
Yeah. Well, what happens is I have it on an arm that bends, and it sort of starts to slide over time. The more I type and touch things,
You just have to start talking like this.
Should have had a V8.
All right, you ready?
Oh yeah, let's do it.
All right, recording something. Say something so I can check the levels.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. I'm staring at a ceiling fan, and the air conditioner's on, and the smoke detector's blinking, and
there you go.
Hey, look, chapstick.